Great. So we're going to be talking about planning events in unprecedented times. So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about event preparation, some of the challenges that we have with programming and how to combat those challenges, and then why programming is needed. I always try to present problems with solutions, so hopefully the challenges and how to combat challenges will be helpful, because I know programming and event planning right now is so different than it ever has been in other semesters. So the event preparation step is really crucial because you're giving it all the foresight. You're planning out all the steps, you're developing your timeline, you're getting together as a team, whether that's a team of 3 people or a team of 20, to try to implement the event that you want to have. And throughout this entire presentation, I want you all to know that you can have events right now. I know it's challenging and I know it's a struggle, but it's 100% worth it to be able to gather in safe ways for Purdue students in general. So before you start preparing for your event, ask yourself, what is the purpose? Is it a social event? Is it an informational event? Is it a call out to bring people to your organization, a competition, fundraiser? Those things are all so important whenever you are preparing your event. Who is the intended audience? Back in the day when you're planning events, you probably thought generally your intended audience is just all students. But right now you have to think about it a little differently. Thinking about your intended audience encapsulates everyone that identifies as a Purdue student. So that would be fully virtual students, students who live off campus, sometimes have classes on campus, or people here who are here all the time. And that may not have been the thought process that you had before. And it's all about creating events that are accessible to the audience that you're trying to reach. So if you truly are just trying to recruit for your organization or get some information out and you want to make sure it's inclusive of all Purdue students, making sure that your format really reflects that. Thinking about how many people you expect to attend. This is a huge one because especially with the attendance caps with the county and COVID right now, you need to know that your space is going to be able to hold, if you're having 25 people, that your space will allow for social distancing, that it will allow for all the activities that you have, and just thinking about those pieces. Also, your format might change even if it's a fully virtual event. You might want to switch your format or the structure of your event based on how many people you expect to attend. So if you're having a Zoom call with 10 people, you're probably going to act differently than and kind of structure the virtual event differently than you would for a Zoom call of 130. It's completely different beast. So thinking about how many people you expect to attend. That segues into format. Are you doing a fully in-person event? Do you have the capabilities to make it hybrid? Are you safer doing a fully virtual event? Is that what you've decided on as a team? Thinking about all of those things is super crucial. And like I said, some of these segue really into each other. The format, thinking about that when you're thinking about resources, because sometimes having a hybrid event where you have a live stream component or you have some technological needs for your in-person space so that it is a truly hybrid event. Sometimes you need to work with Hall of Music, need to work with AV services. Those things can have costs. And so it's important to know what if you have the resources for the format that you chose. So when we're talking next steps, thinking about funding is one of the least enjoyable parts of an event because the money part is the stressful part. That's personally how I feel. You might feel the same way, or you might just like love numbers. It's completely different. There are a lot of different ways on how to fund an event. So you can fundraise for an event. You can sell different things on campus, work with the Business Office of Student Organizations and with SAO to conduct different fundraisers or philanthropy things. SFAB and SOGA are 2 grants that are offered. And to be honest, those can get a little more specific. So if you have specific SOGA or SFAB questions, I would defer you to our website or to email our sao@purdue.edu email, because SOGA and SFAB, we have specific people on the team that work with those grants, and they can give you a lot more information on exactly how to go about it. But just generally speaking, money for student organizations to host different events. SOGA is typically money that is allocated to student organizations who are wanting to host something for that's like open to the Purdue community and not just for their organization and internal members only. SBAB is typically departmental and is a little bit larger sum of money, but the organization has to be backed by a department. It gets a little dicey, so I'll link the webpage after the presentation. You can also partner with other departments or organizations, so that can really help you split the costs. So if there's another organization that has some resources and or funding within their business office account, then you can absolutely co-host an event and collaborate with them. So another next step, where should we have it? Thinking about cost. Some locations do cost on campus, whether that's for catering, what you can have for food, what you can have for equipment, AV services, hall music, like I said, thinking about your cost, where should you have it? Also, huge one right now, which I can imagine is why a lot of you are here, restrictions. That is like the big word for all events is things are restricted right now. We're restricted as a county and as a university and as the way that we gather as friends, there are a lot of restrictions. And so thinking about, is this space large enough? Can we social distance? And just all those messy details. Expected attendance, can you fit everybody? If you're expecting an event with 5 people, are you gonna have it in Loeb? Probably not. Thinking about appropriate spaces that would make your event enjoyable and engaging and not have people leaps and bounds sitting away from each other and not mingling. Finding a space that fits the vibe. So if it's like a competition-based event, like you're doing a pumpkin smash or something, you're not gonna have it in Fowler. You know, just like the basic stuff, finding an appropriate location. And those are all things that are very dependent event by event. So brainstorming, talking as a group, dropping into virtual duty hours, super important. Also, not really relevant right now because I don't think anybody really wants to spend too much time outside right now. But in the warmer months when we would have outdoor events, having a backup rain location or having just a rain plan, even if it is to cancel, and the steps that you would take after that, so crucial. Other things to consider. These are our finer details. I'm really running through a lot of information here. So like I said, questions at the end if you have any specific concerns. Things to consider, tables and chairs. If you reserved a space through space management, that's a classroom, knowing that they're probably not going to move all the tables and chairs and desks out of the classroom. How are you going to work within that space? Is that space appropriate for your event? Also, SAO has options. So if you ever need to rent equipment like tables and chairs and like smaller yard games, you can absolutely do that through SAO. You just call our front desk and we can work with you on that and get you a full list of different things that we offer for rent in our storage closet. Thinking about setup. At your check-in table, do you want posters or more information on how to join your organization? Do you want to link to a QR code of an assessment of how the event went? Is there certain information that you need to convey to everybody? If it's more of like a informational organizational event, those are all things that you should think of in the way you set up the space. Are you going to have handouts? Cleaning up. Sometimes when you plan out your event timeline for an event, you think, oh, the event ends at 9, we're just going to put that down. And then suddenly everyone from your organization leaves at 9 and there's so much to do. So taking into account that that cleanup might take a little bit of time, or maybe it's a super low maintenance event. So thinking about those things. Also thinking about attendance numbers. This one is huge right now because like I have said, and everyone has said, the 25 attendance cap is a little limiting. So thinking, is there a way for us to have shifts? Can we have an event from 7 to 7:30 and then 15 minutes of sanitation time and then another 30-minute shift and have those as separate events? Because that can really maximize the information that you give out, the call outs that you have, even the gatherings that you have. But like I said, there's another option. You can do a hybrid event. You can have people tune in virtually. That also allows students to and attendees to make their own decisions when it comes to attendance of how they want to attend and what they're comfortable with. I love this part. I love talking about marketing. I think marketing is so crucial, especially with virtual events, because, you know, pre-COVID, you could just kind of walk through campus and stumble upon an event outside somewhere and just show up. And there weren't really attendance caps, and it was way more natural feeling. But recruiting people to log on to a Zoom call can be kind of difficult, especially if they're not as engaged, if they're not already members of the organization, or just finding people, getting connected, getting the word out can be difficult. So Boiler Link is a huge thing. Getting your APFs in to where we can hopefully get them reviewed as fast as we can. We have so many in the system, so thank you all for being patient. But Boiler Link is a great way to advertise, selecting those categories, being super descriptive. Chalking, also a great option. There are places that you're not allowed to chalk, but we have information on that on our website. And if you have specific questions, you can let us know. But chalking can be pretty effective, not during wintry, like rainy months very often, but could be. Posting flyers, and flyers don't have to be expensive. You can print flyers and create flyers on Canva. You don't have to be a graphic designer. They have some really awesome templates, and I personally love Canva. I spring for the extra like premium subscription just because I think it's fun. I probably shouldn't, because for me it's a little bit of a waste of money, but I love Canva. I think it's so fun. There's also the ITAP Printing Fund for student organizations. So you can contact ITAP if you have some questions about that to get some posters out there. And the big kahuna, social media. Social media is huge, huge, huge. That's probably one of the main ways that information is actually like put out these days. I know I'm on social media probably too much, but updating your student organization's social media pages, creating cute little templates on your Instagram stories to encourage people to come to the event, and or like doing some fun challenges through Instagram that way can be, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, can be a really great way to increase your engagement. Now, I wanted to take a brief pause in the presentation just to give you all a little note to self, Protect Purdue edition. When SAO comes forward with event guidelines, when we tell you exactly what you can and cannot do, we're doing it purely for your safety. We want you all to still be able to gather and still have events. We don't want to discourage them. We want you to have events, and that's the most important thing. And if you educate yourself on the current guidelines, even if they do come out abruptly sometimes because we're in a really weird, unprecedented time, like everyone says, keeping up on the guidelines, understanding them, and asking questions about them will allow you to have more events that your organization really wants to have, because it's possible and we can absolutely do some really cool stuff. And we want to help you do that, because this should not be a time where we give up and say, oops, can't really have events right now. It's just really difficult. It should be a time where we think about new students at Purdue that are having trouble feeling connected, members of your organization that might be really disappointed or really looking forward to their senior year in this organization. You need to be thinking about all of the experiences that you can create if you just try, and we would love to help you try. So knowing that we're always here as a resource is super important, and we're not trying to discourage your events. Some tips and tricks for APFs. APFs are a necessary evil, super fun. It's a good way for all of the questions to be answered in one common place. So I would encourage you to submit your APFs in advance. Be patient with us as we get back ahead of the ball as the semester is starting. But some things that you need to include on your APFs to make it a little easier: select your safety officer, understand what a safety officer does. So safety officer is essentially your designated person that's going to understand all the COVID guidelines, know how people have to hand out food, know how people have to hand out things, when people need to change their gloves, telling people, please keep your mask on, like those kind of people, because they are necessary for us to continue having safe events. Creating a safety plan. In an APF, the more information, the better. So if you're in an enclosed space or you're doing shifts of an event, saying exactly how you're going to sanitize, saying exactly which door people will enter and which one will exit to avoid congestion, knowing what contact, like what cross contact services you might have. Are two people going to have to click the same button on a laptop? Will you sanitize in between? Like all of those really nitty gritty details that you might not even think to mention will be should be included in your APF as a safety plan so that you don't get a million questions from us asking, how are you going to do this? Are you going to have cross contact? Like, try not to sanitize, you know, all of those things that we have to say necessarily because we want to keep you safe. Enable RSVPs and use the check-in app. It makes it so much easier, especially if you are trying to hit that max attendance cap of 25. Enabling RSVPs, telling people to RSVP in advance will make it so much easier to not just cut everyone off at the door. And that way people who really want to come to the event can be there and can RSVP in advance. The mobile check-in app, super handy, no cross contact, and is a really good way to track attendance at your events. Also, just in general, detail is so good on your APFs. I know it's a monotonous process, but if you have a recurring event, like if you have recurring call outs, if you have recurring meetings, just doing one form with multiple dates so that you don't have to rewrite will make your life easier. Now, here are some challenges of programming. Some challenges for all events if you don't create an event timeline. Sometimes if you say the event is from 7 to 9 and all of your volunteers or people from your organization show up at 6:45, it's really hard to be ready for the event at 7. If it's something that's a little less intense and it's just like a general meeting, sure, that's completely fine. But larger scale events or events with moving pieces, it's great to have an event timeline of when people are showing up, when the doors are opening, like, are we going to be set up by this time or this time? And then also knowing when the event is going to end and when cleanup is ideally going to end, having all that information on an event timeline. Also having an unclear communication of responsibility, the kind of he said, she said, oh, she said she was going to get this done. He said he was going to do this. They said they were going to do this. It can make it really, really difficult to work as a team and actually execute the events you want. So being super clear about whose responsibility is what. And that makes events so much nicer sometimes because one person can put in reservations with space management in the APF and another person can be brainstorming logistics behind and details to include in the APF. And just working together will make it a lot easier. Turnout. This is a big one. Especially for virtual events, sometimes you have 2, sometimes you have 100, and sometimes you don't really know why. Also, just in-person events, getting that word out, sometimes turnout can be a real issue. So word of mouth, using all of your marketing techniques and really planning it out in advance is a great way to increase your turnout at events. Assessment. If you don't create an assessment of the event for people to take, or even just assessing how the event went with your group after, you can repeat the same issues. Like if people showed up 5 minutes before the event starts and you had no one there for setup, and you don't bring that up at the end and discuss it, your events won't be better in the future. So identifying those pros and cons and working off of that. Accessibility is a huge one. In the past, we used to think about accessibility as like physically accessible. Is the event going to be accessible to all students? Are they going to be able to get here? Is it at a good time of day? How's the location? And now it's a little bit more of like, can we appeal to all of our audiences, virtual, otherwise? Knowing about that. Now, challenges for specifically virtual events, attendance. Like I said, it can be difficult for people to want to log into a Zoom or a Teams or a WebEx after doing that in class all day. So trying to find ways to lure people in, having some sort of incentive for them to come, doing any sort of like prize giveaways, like fun little competitions, you can totally do that. There are some outlines of prizes and giveaway rules and guidelines on our website as well. Big one for virtual events, engagement, because sometimes you're staring at a screen and nobody has their cameras on and nobody is engaging with you or giving you ideas. That's why it's been so nice that you all have told me when I was having all my tech problems that you couldn't see my screen, because I would have been giving this presentation with like nothing behind me, and fingers crossed it's still working. But engagement on a Zoom can be really, really difficult. So maybe at the beginning saying, you're comfortable having your camera on, I would love to be able to chat with you, or finding ways to get the conversation going, increasing like creating breakout rooms, or doing like a question of the day to start you out, depending on the template of the event, obviously. So combating challenges, thinking about events that would pique your interest. Don't plan events that you wouldn't want to go to. That's just a common thing, because if you wouldn't want to go, why should other people want to go? How are you going to be able to market it if it's not something that you're interested in? So thinking about events that would pique your interest and plan those. Consider the what ifs. What if it rains? What if no one shows up? What if our marketing doesn't work? What if the food doesn't show up in time? Planning those things out and knowing, okay, no, the food will show up in time. I've confirmed it. I booked a backup location. If nobody shows up, we're still going to have fun. Just planning out all of those what ifs and thinking in advance is really good. Market, market, market. One second, I'm getting a couple of notifications from up here. So market your event as much as you can. Just on social media, word of mouth, tell people to come, like try your best to advertise the event as good as you can. And also, like I said, create that event checklist. It'll help you so much, and I think you'll really appreciate it. Sorry, I'm reading the chat because I haven't been reading it. Okay, you can see the screen. Oh, you can request for Canva Pro for free as a student. That's awesome. Do we need to have a safety officer listed in our Constitution, or could we go without it? It doesn't have to be specified in your Constitution, just in the APF, because your safety officer can actually change event by event, if that makes sense. So you can have a specific person that's a safety officer at Thursday's event, and there can be a different organization member that's a safety officer at Friday's event, if that kind of makes sense. Or president can complete the training, and then there's going to be, yeah. Okay, great. And then that event checklist, super duper important. It really helps. I'm the kind of person that you can probably already tell. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of words, and I tend to talk a lot. So if I don't have a checklist or some sort of guide, it can be really hard for me to get all my information out. So especially in meetings, having an agenda, even if it's like a short agenda and you're like, I won't forget everything, put everything down, just little reminders to yourself so that you don't get in front of a screen and get a little confused, because also virtually it can be hard to remember all of the steps to an event. And then at the end, asking everybody like how it went. What can we do better next time? Especially if it's an event that you would love to repeat in the future, if it's an esports tournament, if it's some sort of competition, knowing that you might want to have it again in the future. If people really didn't like it, you'd rather know so that your attendance doesn't tank at the next one. So thinking about participant feedback, getting them before they leave, having QR codes saying, hey, thank you so much for coming. Or even if you do a handout at the door of like candy or some little fun thing, putting the like assessment link on there. And it can literally be a Google form with scales and different things like that. So if you ever have questions about assessment and how to like create assessments for your events, that's another question you can come to us for. Also, some of the most important assessment that you're going to get after an event is from your team. So thinking about it while it's still fresh, committing to changes that you will make for the next time, and doing pros and cons. Don't let them leave until you ask, what did you enjoy? I'm gonna end that. Don't let them leave until you ask them what didn't go well. If people got complaints or overheard people saying, oh, I didn't really like this at all, you would rather know, because it's good to improve for the next event. Okay. That is my basic spiel. It wasn't a super long presentation, but we have plenty of time for Q&A right now. So I want to run through these last little informational slides before we open up to a Q&A, and I stop sharing my screen. So just so you know, we are here to help. Our email is a great resource. So if you ever have a question that's a little bit more lengthy, more specific, it needs to have kind of a paper trail if we need to forward it on to BOSO or other campus partners. Email is great. Front desk, that's our phone number. You'll probably get to talk to lovely Carol, who's at our front desk, and she's a great person to talk to about renting equipment from us. And then we're super active on Instagram. Our Purdue SAO, our Instagram is a great way to keep in touch with us. And if you're the kind of person, that really needs an answer super quick, or doesn't want to pop into our duty hours, doesn't want to call, doesn't want to email, you can DM us, which is really fun. And Cassandra, who works our Instagram, is really good at responding quickly. So feel free to DM us on Instagram if it's a quick question that you think could be resolved that way. And then here is a quick graphic. This is our virtual drop-in hours graphic. So we have virtual drop-in hours on purdue.edu/SAO throughout the entire week. So we'll be on that Zoom sitting, waiting for you to pop in from 10 a.m. to noon, and then 1 to 3. We have different hours on Wednesdays. We have our staff meeting on Wednesday morning, so we don't have anyone monitoring it. But if you have any questions about our virtual drop-in hours, check our website. Also, I'm gonna leave this up for like a couple seconds if you wanna take a picture so you know our hours. But purdue.edu/SAO is that website where you can click the link to connect with a student affairs specialist in SAO. And if you hop on tomorrow, it will be me. So great, I'm gonna talk ahead. And then, thank you. I have been Riley Cornett. I actually didn't do much of an introduction. I probably should do that. So my name is Riley Cornett, Student Affairs Specialist, Programs and Engagement. I work in SAO, and you can always set up appointments with me separately. So if you ever need to actually chat in person, I have my Boiler Connect availability set up, so you can absolutely talk to me that way. Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to look at the chat. What is the best way to go about reserving an event space? Is there a specific website? There are several websites. So we have Unitime is a great website to reserve space through. Specific departments and specific locations may have different processes. If you want to reserve a space in the Union or in Stewart, there are specific people you would contact, and all of that information about specific spaces should be on our website. Or if you ever have a quick question about it, you can DM us. But most of it is through, Recwell. Thank you so much for popping that in there. So that's where you would reserve for like the co-rec and those spaces. But a lot of it is through Unitime.
I have a question about accessibility for virtual events. Someone who presented with our organization before, when they were sharing their screen, they were able to have basically live speech to text translation happening, and that was also being shown. Do you know of any software or plugins that we could use to do that?
I actually don't, but that is a fantastic question, because that is definitely something that I should have been doing this entire time and for our future workshops. I'm going to write that down, because I think a lot of live speech to text softwares are a little behind the times and need to get a little ahead of it for captioning and that accessibility piece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit more research about that and reach out to the team and see if there's any resources that they've seen that have worked really well. And if you want, I can reach out to you and or with the slides, give a little more information in an email.
Can I jump in real quick about that?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I was doing some research today to look into opening a Zoom account specifically for our student org. And then I think on the FAQ page for Zoom, I think if your student org is approved through like Link and is a registered student organization Zoom account, I think Zoom Education allows for speech to text closed captioning.
That's a great answer. No, that really helps. I hope that kind of answered your question a little bit, but that's really good to know. I actually didn't know that either. Thank you for saying that.
It's regarding hosting events off campus. Is there any rundown you could give about what's allowed and what's capable right now?
Yeah, right now, what's capable is that we're not currently allowing off-campus travel or off-campus event locations. It's purely because of COVID spread and control, and us knowing the capacities of our rental spaces and our spaces on campus, but not necessarily knowing much about off-campus spaces or being able to like control the safety and the guidelines within those spaces. So we currently are not allowing any off-campus travel or off-campus meetings, events, etc. That can get a little confusing because a lot of spaces that are on campus aren't considered on campus. So there can be buildings in the middle of campus that are technically off campus, which is a little strange. So if you're ever unsure about if a space is considered on campus or off campus, just ask us. A lot of the fraternity sorority cooperative life houses are considered off campus spaces. So that's just an example.
So for food distribution, I've heard that at least for catering events, they have someone who's food certified, who's allowed to be serving the food. But
Yeah.
for other events that we have food and we plan to serve it, do our leaders have to be food certified to be able to do that, or can they follow general guidelines of masking, wearing gloves, and like only handing it, like we load it on a plate, we don't let attendees take it on their own? Like, are those enough precautions?
Yeah. So food is such a bane of my existence this semester, just because it can be such a quick way to spread virus if you don't do it correctly. Like, food safety is on another level right now. So completely transparent, prepackaged, individually wrapped food is kind of all we're allowing right now. So like prepackaged snacks, prepackaged bags of chips and things. You can still have things like cupcakes and brownies, but you just have to find somewhere that will prepackage them themselves. So if you get insomnia cookies, having them individually wrapped in the little wax paper bags by them is important, because we are currently not allowing student organizations to, for example, take a pan of brownies, cut them up, and separate them into Ziploc bags. We're not allowing that because that's too much cross contact. They have to be prepackaged, individually wrapped when the org receives them by wherever they're going through, if that makes sense. And when you're handing out food, it's wearing gloves and changing those gloves every 30 minutes. Super important, just because of the sanitation and everything, making sure everyone's wearing masks, social distancing in line. And when people are eating at an event, try your best to have them sitting social distance and also facing the same direction. I think it'll get easier. I think food will become something that bonds us in the future again. I'm hoping as COVID gets better and guidelines release, we can start really eating at events in the future, because it's my favorite part. Thank you so much for coming. It was so much nicer to actually do this presentation and have people show up. So I can't even tell you how much I appreciate it, because I know screen fatigue is a real thing, like I said. So I hope you all have a great night and a great semester and plan some fun events. And if you ever need me, you know where to find me.